Assume there we are, recording in progress. Welcome, everybody. Marissa is our producer today. Say hello, Marissa.
Hello.
There you go. Thanks for joining us. We've got a jam-packed webinar, lots of information, maybe a little bit too much information, but really topical topic for today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Terry Gillis, President and CEO of ARIA Consulting, and absolute pleasure to be with you today. Typically, the reason we have Marissa here is because I would mess this up, but more importantly, as we go through the session, if you have comments, you want to put them into the chat or whatever. If you raise your hand, you got a question, anything like that, she's going to be able to help that because I'm usually focused on the content and not paying attention to those sorts of things. So if anything comes up, please, raise a hand, drop a comment in the box, and she'll interrupt as we go along. And if, I'd rather it be interactive and deal with issues as they arise rather than try and jam in at the end. So hopefully that makes some good sense. So without further ado, let's get cracking on, hiring when every seat matters because every seat does matter today. And probably the best way to start today is really to talk about the red flashing light that should be happening in all of our worlds, and that is Canada is facing a structural demographic crunch. What that means is our workforce is aging faster than is being replaced. Our I think our birth rate is like 1.3 or something like that. It needs to be 2.1 in order to sustain your population. So our population through birth anyway is declining. Workers aged 55 plus. That no, that seems to be a bad echo. So isn't that interesting? I wonder why we have an echo. Marissa, do you have any insight
I
into
don't seem to hear anything on my side. Is that happening for anybody else?
Yeah, let's see. What's the verdict there, Marissa?
Doesn't seem to be happening to anybody else.
All right, cool. All right, so we'll motor along. Whoever posted that, maybe you want to jump out and come jump back in. Hard to say. So anyway, bottom line, our workforce 55 plus is now 1/5 of our labor force. That's just craziness. The practical reality now is that when somebody leaves, or they don't succeed in their role, that simply means you don't have a big bench behind them. I mean, gone are the days when people would line up, you turn on the help wanted sign and they'd line up like ants to a picnic. Those days are gone simply because our demographics are such an immigration, which created a bit of a storm. That's not going to solve the problem for us either. So the other thing that's going on right now is the labor market is shrinking. What do we mean by that? That's people that are actually participating in the market. So first we've got a demographic shift, but then the labor market itself is shifting. Okay. So what's happening there is um, the labor market is tightening, and not because of job creation, but because people are just exiting the workforce altogether. So that means replacing a bad hire. If you make a bad hire, it's going to be that just so much harder than before to replace them. Our job vacancies remain structurally elevated, despite some cooling of late. Certainly, the media likes to hype, the unemployment rate is skyrocketing and the sky is falling and the world's going to come to an end. But the reality is this, there are still thousands and thousands of unfilled roles. Um, and that's the classic things going on for years now, the mismatch between skills and available workers. Thing is, if you're in healthcare, you're in the trades, you're in manufacturing or any professional roles, this is probably hurting you a little bit, So in other words, when a hire fails, your roles are going to stay open longer, which compounds the productivity losses and those sorts of things. And then this is not just unique to Canada. This is a global issue. So the idea that we can just maybe go and poach from other countries with immigration, it's you can't assume that's going to work. And basically you can't assume that you can hire your way out of a bad hire. It's just not going to work. So the bottom line is a bad hire is no longer a performance issue. A bad hire now is a capacity risk inside your organization. So bad hires will be longer vacancies, higher replacement costs, greater burnout risks. We just got to get really, really, really good at this. So when every seat matters, you got to be good at this. So let's just take a quick poll. I'm going to have Marissa launch this. So the question we have on our table, real simple question. In the past 12 months, has hiring been A, easier, B, harder, or C, Goldilocks about the same. So just curious, just kind of seeing how this works. So go ahead and throw in your answers there real quick. We'll see how this breaks down percentage wise. We're real curious. Has it gotten easier? Is it harder? Or is it about the same? And Marissa, I'll rely on you to let me know when that's done. So about 60% is about the same, 33% harder. No, only 7% of you said that it was easier. So both the same. So that's actually not that terribly surprising. So did my slides just disappear, Marissa?
No, they're still there.
Okay, because I can't see them now, which is awesome. So I'm gonna go back to my screen. So there it is. Yeah, okay, good. All right. So you can see my screen, correct?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, cool. So about the same. All right. So the bottom line is we really can't afford to get this wrong. It's just um, it's too hard for us. If we're getting this wrong, we're gonna get in deep trouble. And now I can't get my slides to advance. Mother of Darkness. Why is this? So let's keep rolling here. Yeah. So the problem is when you bring up the poll, it just shuts down my slides. It's super awesome. Let me stop my share for a second. My apologies. Holy doodle. This is crazy. Um, okay. Hang on. I gotta shrink this. Talks amongst yourselves. There we go. We're back over here. And we're back over here. Uh, sorry about this, folks. This is where we played the really bad music for you. So, um, sorry, Marissa, I'm completely shut down here on my end. I apologize.
Do you want me to share the slides on my side?
No, because I got to run them. So,
Okay.
so let me just get at this. Hang on. I'm going to move it to a different monitor. I think it's the monitor that's causing the problem. There we go. I'll shut this down and I go ahead and share screen two. Stop sharing. Oh my goodness. This is crazy. Why is this happening? There we go. This should be working now. Tell me that's working now. Yes.
Yep, you're back up.
All right, cool. All right. So you can't, so bottom line, we can't afford to get this wrong. So every hire becomes a strategic investment, which means getting the selection right, picking the right people becomes super, super critical and important. It's a strategic piece. So we got to get this right. So um, the bottom line is the hidden costs will derail you, like the time to fill, your ramp up time, the drag on management because you're having to backstop the work, your turnover, your productivity gains, your team morale. Your morale gets messed up, increased workloads because somebody else is gone. It just becomes really, really difficult on your organization, and turnovers is expensive, especially at scale. Anywhere from 30% to 5 times somebody's salary. And hiring itself is a real spend issue, especially at senior levels, like, almost 7 times more expensive than at non-executive hires. Executive hires are very, very difficult. And we just got to get this right because it's just too expensive. So what's our world like? Well, our world, sadly, is full of fibs, white lies, and misrepresentation. Okay. And this has been going on for years and years now. You look at the different data, about 70% of US workers said they've lied on a resume. 65% of them said they lied on the resume at least once recently. This is some different studies. 75% of HR managers have reported having caught a lie on a resume in a study that was conducted by Career Builder. In a peer-reviewed journal, the Journal of Applied Psychology, they developed something called the Interview Faking Behavior Scale. The authors reported that 90% of undergraduate job candidates faked their information during employment interviews. Resume lying is commonly reported in self-reported surveys, anywhere from about a third to two-thirds of respondents saying, yes, at some point in time, I lied on my resume. Interview and precedent management, extremely common. Research suggests most candidates engage in some form of faking, while a smaller subset were closer to saying, yes, I explicitly lied in my interview. a peer-reviewed journal on studying interview faking. 90% of undergraduate job candidates engage in some sort of faking on their interviews. In other words, fibs, white lies, and misrepresentation is the norm for candidates arriving on our doorsteps in our organizations. Like, wow, that's super awesome. I just realized I don't have my camera on, so we'll get back on live with you. There, we're all back in business. So the question is, what are we going to do about this? Because this is intense, right? So if our inputs are inflated, doesn't it stand to reason that we need methods that are harder for people to game the system, and things that are more that can predict performance better and more reliably than just the self-report mechanisms that we're all attuned to using and use a lot. So, of course, naturally, the thing that comes to mind is, well, is this, is the great savior here? Is it AI? AI is everywhere. Everybody talks about AI, or or is it? Well, let's find out because there's a lot of really interesting information about AI. So, first of all, we all know that the proliferation of AI is just epic. Right now, about close to $400 billion a year industry. By 2030, they predict this is going to be in the trillions of dollars in this industry. When you look at different business surveys on average, we sort of looked at about 4 or 5 different studies. The average is about 78, 70, 75, more than three-quarters of businesses have implemented AI in their organizations. Thousands and thousands of free AI apps out there. I mean, my goodness, every day there's a new one doing something. Okay. This is especially troubling in the world of HR. The reason is there are now nation states that are fabricating AI employees so that they can get into your systems and steal your data. That's a thing. It's a huge, huge thing right now. There's fraud, there's forgery, there's identity theft that's going on, which begets the question, who's the candidate really at the end of the day? IBM now, they're using 94% of their HR questions are now answered through AI. So they're implementing it. So instead of an HR person, a real live person, you're getting a chatbot that's AI driven. The HR business role has all been eliminated in IBM, and I think this is something that a lot of organizations are getting involved in and taking on. And in fact, the HR dollars at IBM are being redirected to engineering and sales. So for our HR folks out there, it's a tough time, but that means that in our organization, AI is becoming just a part of life. But here's the downside to that. AI kind of makes us kind of dumb. It decreases our critical thinking because we get over reliance on the outputs. How many people have put something into ChatGPT or Copilot or Claude or any one of these different mechanisms out there and taken it, copied and pasted and thrown it over? I did a webinar a little while ago, maybe some of you on it, where I was looking at one of our competitors and they had put on their website what their services line was, and their service line included insert name of service here, which was a complete came out of an AI. Like, you got to read your stuff. Can't just accept it at face value, but people do. It automates complex tasks. That's great. And 40% of cognitive tasks now being automated, which is great, I suppose. But we now favor speed over depth. So we want some quick answers, not deep answers, and that can hurt us sometimes. The digital distraction, constantly being notified. I mean, now it's like, your phone rings or beeps or, you hear a buzz. We will drop everything. We're so focused on that world. And it really means that we're not using our analytical minds as much as we're. In other words, what's happening is we're creating a lot of work slop in our organization. And this is something that comes out of a couple of one that's out of Stanford, another one's out of the BetterUp Labs, that close to 50% of workers are now experiencing what's called work slop, which is really low effort AI generated output that people aren't really taking the level of discernment that requires to say, is this stuff good or not? So it's kind of, AI is great, but it also can, if we don't pay attention to it, if we're not continuing involve real humans, and like what I like to say is real intelligence into this, we run the risk of negating our critical thinking skills. So the reality today, according to the World Economic Forum, 90% of employers, 90% across the globe are using some form of automated system to fill their jobs applications. That's crazy. And 80%, 88% of them are employing some form of AI for initial candidate screens. So we just got finished saying all that critical thinking has gone away. The critical thinking that makes us uniquely human has been displaced by AI, and AI is now taking almost exclusive, little frightening from my perspective. We know that its place in hiring is going to be inevitable because and hiring and creates vast amounts of data, and AI can then translate that really well into what we call talent signals, so they can scrub the data and look for commonalities. And this is what AI is really good at, these sorts of things. But talent markets are still inefficient. Okay. What in essence has happened is AI has created what somebody has coined, not my term, but theirs, and I should have a quote on there, but um, it's an automation arms race, which is more inhumane for candidates and recruiters. So we're curious, another quick poll, if we would, and that is, how much have you integrated AI into your hiring process? Not at all. We keep it real. We use it somewhat, but we always rely on human judgment. We've implemented AI screening to our process to speed up candidate screening, and AI drives the majority of our hiring processes now. So we're just curious as to how that is because we're seeing studies saying 90% of companies are using some form of it. What say you out there on our poll today, so we can get a feel for what's happening in our part of the world? So I'll leave that for Marissa to let us know. So, most of them, so 42% of our keeping it real. Shout out to you folks. We use the AI somewhat. We're always relying on human judgment. Okay, so no one has completely adopted it, and no one is the nobody has the majority of the hiring processes now. So that's good news. But you'll be seduced by the AI folks before long. So you'll see in a minute why we think that might be dangerous. So so not only is it, and not necessarily with this crew, but we starting to see that proliferation inside of our organizations. Here's the other thing. It is rampant with our candidates. Holy Mother Mary. This is absolutely wild. 60% of candidates using AI at some point in the application process. This came out of a study last year, CNBC. I hire 40, essentially 41% of people have used AI tools for job search tasks like writing and customizing resumes and preparing for interviews. Um, the Resume Now, just about a year ago, 68% using AI to write resumes, 67% of them, but 1% fall off because they think they're really good, I guess, and writing their cover letters for them. And then there was a study a year and a bit ago from Capterra, where about 50% of Canadian job seekers using AI tools, 82% report using AI to exaggerate or to lie about their skills. Like, what is going on? So, and it gets worse because now we have a little thing called spamlications. What the heck is that? Well, that's when people use generative AI to mass apply and mass produce polished resumes, cover letters, and oftentimes when you have, they throw up answer these questions, answering those interview questions, that just floods the market with more volume than ever before. And in result of doing that, it erodes trust in the the very, very tools that we use to do our hiring. So trust is starting to erode. So, now content is faked at a scale we've never seen before. So we already saw at the beginning, fibs, white lies, and fabrications has been around for years. It's long before AI, long before this. I mean, we've been doing this for people and doing this for years. But now we have the ability to take that and, explode that into the marketplace. So what happens is it pushes us back to those less scalable methods, like the things we trust, well, like in-person meetings and referrals and trusted networks and whatnot. But then what happens is that volume erodes our trust in our systems. Speed is valued over accuracy, but we know that accuracy is what we're looking for, not necessarily speed. And outcome data is often too weak to train our AI bots or our AI learning language systems. We can't train them to be better. unless you're paying somebody an exorbitant amount of money to do that. And then our historical biases then get actually replicated or amplified because we don't necessarily follow the data. So if spam locations becomes a problem, volume becomes a problem, trust gets eroded. This is a bit of a gong show. Um, and I'm sure you've all seen this, and some of you may have done it yourself. I just had somebody yesterday say, "Oh yeah, well, I took my resume, I took the job posting, and I threw the both of them into ChatGPT, and it created a resume for me." You know, polished resumes, they mask the gaps that exist. They obscure the genuine fit. They raise decision quality requirements are just we don't know what's happening there. So we just for fun, we decided, well, let's see what would happen if we took a resume of one of our candidates in transition here. So this was their original resume. We've obviously taken protected their identity, but this was their first cut at a resume. Okay, that's it. Okay, with nothing other than, hey, ChatGPT, make this resume better. Here you are. Now look at on the left. Now look on the right. This person has done nothing short of put this into an AI tool to create something that on the surface looks really, really impressive. And also, if you're using an applicant tracking system, AI is going to figure out what the keywords are, which is why you're seeing those core competency pieces listed second, because that's to get through your applicant tracking system. So we take what's on the right and create what's on the left, and this is sort of how it continued on the next piece. But this is pretty nice, and this is what you're getting now. In terms of, I suspect many of you are getting these at your end now. Oh, and just when you thought it was safe to get back in the water, to steal a phrase from Jaws 2, well, now we have AI interviews. What's that about? Well, there's now a growing category of tools that provide real-time interview support. So if you're doing something online like we're doing here, and you're interviewing me, it's running in the background with the job description already loaded into it. And it's listening to the questions you're asking. And in real time, it's going through my resume, your job application, and your question, and feeding back to me right across my screen that which I should report back to you. So it isn't me, it's AI. So they operate during the interview itself, not just in the prep anymore. It used to be they helped with the resume, like we just saw. It used to say, here's some of the top 10 interview questions you can expect to see. Here's how you might want to answer them. Now it's actually doing it in real time, real time. Okay. So, and most of them are marketing, hey, you can trust us because we have a stealth or an undetectable option, which means you that's interviewing me can't tell what's playing on my computer at my end. Kind of scary. As a result, we get AI supported structured phrasing versus the reality that we're after, which is what is their thinking, their judgment, and their communication skills. And we're not getting that because AI is presenting on their behalf. This significantly reduces the reliability of interviews. And for those that are interested, Sensi AI, Wise Whisper, AI Interview Answer Buddy, Live Interview AI, just go into your own AI tool and say, what are the top 5 tools for helping with interviews? They're so easy to get. They're so simple to get. So this depresses me, but we do have some solutions we're going to get to. But let's go ahead and take a look at this poll. So what we're interested in here is, how do you see AI impacting your hiring process? Not seeing it much at all. We see some AI influence, but not a lot. About half the applicants now we get are clearly using some form of AI, or is anything real anymore, which is depressing. So give you a few minutes to crack away at that one, so we can see what the results are here. So about half seeing some AI influence, a couple of you just not much, and about 40% showing about half the applicants we're getting are clearly using artificial intelligence. So interesting. So we're starting to see a creep. The creep is happening, at least with the folks that are on this call. So where we've been on our quick little journey thus far. Well, first of all, we know we've got a demographic issue. We don't have enough workers. That's only going to get worse, not better over time. Um, so that's kind of concerning us. We also have the concern that the application of AI is kind of creating a mess inside organizations. So that's not great. We know that organizations are using AI, but in fact, by doing so, we may actually be creating more biases than we had before. One of them, by the way, is, and I might get to it later, but if not, I'll tell you now. When people think that the organization is using AI, they will stilt their answers, assuming they're not using an AI interview tool, if they're being real and authentic. But what they're going to do is they're going to now think, well, the AI tool is looking for more pragmatic skills, like analytical type skills, as an example. So the very thing we're trying to get away from, which is this homogeneity, we actually recreate it through AI because people respond not how they think, but how they think AI wants to hear it. And then, of course, resumes and interviews are coming to us from an artificial lens, not a real lens. So, if that's not depressing enough, then I'm going to make life even more depressing. That's not the intent, by the way, but it is kind of it's an interesting time. Um, yeah, this is the new bias that emerges that they change people. Okay, we're not being authentic. We are stuck in this notion of trying to talk to AI how we think it wants to hear. So the irony is, in our quest to remove human bias from hiring, we've created a system where AI introduces a whole new form of bias, which is just really kind of counterintuitive. So the other snag we have is right now we don't have any longitudinal evidence of what AI impact. It's so fast, so new. We really don't know what its impact is. But what we do know is that basic writing assistant can, that helps hires a little bit. To introduce objective assessments for fit and capability wherever we can, and with clear candidate communication and oversight. This is the next piece that's going to be disturbing. We got another storm brewing at the same time. This is like moving in parallel, in lockstep parallel. And that's this: managers. Our HR leaders and our employees are signaling a clear manager effectiveness gap right now, and this is becoming prolific. This is a crisis. This is almost as big a deal for me as the demographic crisis. Our manager effectiveness is sliding and it's dangerous. What we're finding is the satisfaction with mid-level and frontline manager effectiveness is at an all-time low. We're seeing employee trust and satisfaction in manager is also exceptionally low. And of course, those downstream costs come back to bite us with weaker productivity, performance, morale, retention risk, etc. So at the same time, the scope of our managers has exploded with many managers now. Like we've talked to, done some very minor surveys on this, and by that I mean small sample sizes, but like up to 80% of managers are overwhelmed and stressed out. That's crazy. So, and a growing share of those managers would actually prefer not to be people managers. A large number of them would say, you know what? Um, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. So this explains why filling the role is not the same as being committed to it. And oftentimes we tap somebody in the shoulder. Their own egos can't allow them to say, you know what, I'm not interested in that. And then we throw them into the deep end without any life jackets and hope that they swim. So our current selection processes and practices promote um, people based on backward-looking indicators like, hey, they've done well before, rather than forward-looking indicators like motivation, capability for people leadership. We don't assess that. We ask questions, behavioral-based questions. Tell me about a time when. I don't want to know about a time when. I mean, I do, but I need to augment that with also what motivates you, what's your capacity. Let's do some figuring out of um, what your key elements of relative to leadership are. So in other words, we need to do better. Okay. We need to understand, do they want the work? Can they do the work? Will they sustain the work? Our manager leadership selection process it really needs to be enhanced. So we got to look at things like motivation and commitment to people. We have to look at the capability for critical and comfortable parts of management. Do they have that capability? We also need to know what their development needs are and coach accordingly. Absent that, we're going to continue to have misalignment in our management score. So you having any fun yet? I mean, this is depressing. I mean, we've got a demographic crunch. We've got people lying to us. We've got AI helping us, but it's creating work slop. We've got AI applications coming at us from every angle. Most of it's coming in, at least with some lies, or there's some hyperbole attached to them. We've got managers who are stuck in roles they don't want to be in. Maybe we should just all go. I hate to be that guy, but let's raise the alarm bell. This is a big freaking deal, but there is a solution. And I think this is where a lot of organizations get caught. And that solution is assessment. Good psychometric assessment. Why? Because they're more objective measures than our own biases that we have as individuals, but the biases that artificial intelligence has just exacerbated. You got to remember, artificial intelligence is fed by humans. Okay, the algorithms are fed by humans, and so yes, the learning systems and all that sort of thing. But fundamentally, if a bias exists, AI is actually exacerbating that. So objective measures. What else? We get a greater in-depth knowledge of candidates through adding assessment to our protocols because we get good, rich data. I'll get to that in a minute, the kinds of data that you can get. It highlights qualities and competencies that are not typically evident in most candidates, unless, of course, maybe they've got an AI bot in the background that's feeding them answers, but then that's not real, it's artificial. It removes biases, our own biases. If it's good assessment, now we'll get to a minute the difference between good assessment and bad assessment, but good assessment will eliminate the biases that exist, allows for that heterogeneity that is so critical to our success. We know diversity in cognition, our thoughts, our backgrounds, the way we look at things creates better outcomes. That's been proven 16 ways to Sunday, despite what the rhetoric may be in other parts of the world. But heterogeneity is so incredibly powerful for our organizations. So it allows for that. It also brings in some consistency in decision making and lowers your risk of a mishire or misfire, well, mishire, and early turnover. So this should get you excited. Okay. So what does good look like? What's a good assessment? You thrown this term around, Terry. What's that mean? Validity. Tools have to be valid. Oh my goodness. How many people have used tools that have absolutely no evidence that they are valid? They have not been vetted by the scientific community. It's somebody created something on the side of their desk and hope that it's actually telling what they think it's supposed to tell them. Validity is, does the tool actually measure what it claims to measure? And does it predict performance? You need to know that in a good assessment tool. Otherwise, you might as well look at your horoscope because it would probably be about as accurate. Reliable. Is it reliable? Are the results stable and consistent if the same person were to take it again? Or is it a tool that's sort of randomized? You don't randomize tools. You want good, solid data. Fit. Okay. Why good is role specific, context specific, and future focused, not generic. When we talk about fit, we're talking about what makes it work together. And there are measures we'll talk about in a minute that we actually really strongly encourage people to look at. Okay. It's role specific, it's context specific, it's future focused, it's not a generic thing. Okay. So getting our assessments right. We just need to get these right. Some of the common misconceptions, any assessment's better than none. No, that's not true. Personality tests will tell you who will succeed. On their own, personality assessments do not predict performance, folks. They do not. So if you're using, DISC to help you select people, you're that's like playing baseball with a hockey stick. Good luck to you. And if you're not using good assessments, then it just set up your own credibility. Okay. There's a lot of pop psychology out there, folks. A lot of pop psychology. Um, unvalidated tools, those internet quizzes that, come across our screens from time to time, um, unidimensional assessments that are application for everything under the sun. They'll tell you what you should have for dinner as well. Um, Tools that feel on the surface as they have what we call face validity, where they seem to be measuring, but they're not. There's a lot of pop psychology here. And what we're really getting at here is the goal is, we're not here to shame. It just we can appreciate why many of you may be really, really confused about what tool to use because there's an awful lot of noise in the marketplace right now. The other piece, and we mentioned this as part of our overview of the session today, there's a distinction between creating an assessment for selection and an assessment for development. Some tools are designed to predict performance. That's a selection tool. They're predictable. They're saying, we think this is what will happen in the future. Ergo, this will influence a selection question or argument. Others are designed for what we would refer to as sort of self-awareness and growth, which are more development in nature. It's like, hey, Freddie Glick, your self-awareness is in this context. Here's what we found. And let's talk about how that would influence your own development. So there's two different approaches. Selection is predictive, whereas development is self-awareness generation. Okay. Problems also arise when we try to use a one size fits all type of approach. You're going to want to alter your assessment protocols based on the task at hand. And the final thing that I'd like to point out is a lot of people, we already saw this, and this is not a slight to humans. I think it's inevitable when you're trying to put your best foot forward that you're going to fib a little bit. We saw that. It's been going on for years, long before AI and long before digitalization. What that means is sometimes when people are responding to assessments, they will actually try to stilt the assessment in the way they think they want it to go. Most good tools will have something in there that will measure what we call social desirable responding, which basically means this person is trying to game the system and can flag that. And so then we don't necessarily throw the results out, but we certainly say these results are suspect, which leads to another comment in a second around how you go about building a great assessment. And that is not one test or not one tool, not one assessment, because if they try to fake that tool, you basically all the results are suspect. And some tools out there are one trick ponies. You answer a whole litany of questions and they'll tell you your personal style, your leadership capabilities, which team you should work on, what your best role is, and everything else. If you were taking that and you tried to stilt that in how you thought it wanted to, and what you thought the output should be, then we can't really trust any of the results. And all those different measures it purports to offer as insight get sort of thrown out, baby with the bathwater, as it were. So we believe in something different here at ARIA. We believe that you need to use a multiple assessment battery or a multiple assessment protocol. Things you need to really look at: cognitive ability, job relevant problem solving complexity. You'll notice that there's two asterisks there, and that's for a reason. Over 85 years, what the research consistently shows is the general mental ability or cognitive ability is the best predictor of future performance, bar none, full stop. So the better it aligns or benchmarks to certain roles, the greater the confidence we have that they're going to do well in that role. In fact, one of the dangers here is you use a one size fits all approach to general mental ability or cognitive ability. You need to benchmark against various roles because different roles require different cognitive ability. It pains me to see people that don't do this, and then somebody doesn't have a strong general mental ability. It might be aligned to what their role is, but they're measuring it against the CEO, which is completely inappropriate. Personality and work style. What are your behavioral tendencies under pressure? Now, we typically use these in development, but we can use work styles to help us predict what will happen in certain scenarios. We also strongly advocate emotional intelligence as a tool to look at, which is your self-management and your interpersonal effectiveness. We also think that, well, we don't think, we know that we can actually measure culture. We use the competing values framework. We can actually determine for you what is your current culture along four dimensions and which ones stand out and which ones maybe not as strong. But we can also ask your team, your current employees, what they would like the culture to be, and we can take candidates and measure against that. Here's the current culture, here's the preferred culture, how well do they fit? So if you're in a culture changing modality, you're wanting to do that, then that helps you with your selection of an appropriate candidate. Also, values alignment. Really, really keen to look at that and how that relates to your own organization. Because when you got values misalignment, you got high stress. And then, of course, interest and motivation. What gets people out of bed? These are the energy drivers that lead to sustained performance. These are the reasons people want to get up and come into work and as opposed to, being the snuffleupagus and dragging themselves into work and, oh, it's another day at the office. We can actually determine whether or not the opportunity that they're pursuing actually fits with their own interests and motivations. So you can see that you can get a lot of information that you might not otherwise get just by asking a question. Why? Because they might be lying to you at worst, or at best, they've got an AI bot telling you what you want to hear, as opposed to a really good assessment can actually get under the hood of the car, as it were, and really bring this information up to the surface, which is a game changer as far as we are concerned. Now, you say, okay, well, that's terrific, Terry. That's really wonderful. But what if I have multiple candidates? How does this all work? Well, one of the things that we do is we can produce something called a heat map, and this is what a heat map would look like, where the orange, light blue colors are better fit, whereas the darker colors and gray colors are less of a fit. So you can see we have, as you move from left to right, we've got general mental ability with across four different candidates, with candidate A, really, really off the charts with that 99th percentile match, versus the lowest candidates B and D. Not bad, still top quartile, but when you compare to candidate A, that candidate A has a bit of a leg up. And you can move along. We look at the interest alignment, how well do their interests align to the role in the organization, values alignment, personal fit, personality fit, their emotional intelligence, how well that fits to the role, how well it fits the organizational culture, and how their work style, which includes things like dealing with conflict, whatnot, how well that aligns. And you can see very clearly that candidate A really kind of has a leg up on the rest of the competitors. Now, we would never say, well, pick candidate A, but we would certainly use that to augment the process that you've been through your own discussions, your initial conversations. Oftentimes, what happens when you bring assessment is it surfaces things and you bring the person back for another conversation to try to get confirmation around some of the things the assessment finds. But on its own, at this point in time, if you're going to play the ponies and put money on it, I'd be putting my money on candidate A at this point in time, just from a pure, unbiased, objective fit. They seem to be handling a lot of things with the exception of the personal style, where candidate D seems to be better. And again, you don't want to take them all. You're going to want to, slice and dice this and discern this as best you can. But on its surface, this is a really interesting way to differentiate between various candidates. So, additional advantages. Uh, when somebody comes through an assessment, you get enhanced engagement because you're already well aware of who they are, which also the third point here in a minute I'm going to get to, which is onboarding is super easy because you already know them. You don't have to spend the first 3 months trying to get to know them. That's that third point there. It also helps with the strategic workforce planning. I love when people will talk to us and say, well, we want to build a succession matrix. Work assessment into your successor matrix to find out who your high potentials are, where they are, where their interests are, where they might align, as opposed to just saying, well, they're in this position now, so the next logical move is to move them into position Y. Well, as we saw, sometimes we're moving managers into positions they don't want. So if we don't ask them the questions and determine what their key motivators are, then guess what? We can make another mistake again. It also, we helps monitor our biases and helps us improve our protocols, better team fit and performance because we have line of sight to things like personal style and culture. And it augments those practices we're already using anyway. So it's not like we're asking you to try on something new. Most of good assessment is often outsourced because it's just super complicated to do it on your own. Not impossible. But what I would caution you against is what I would call the weekend warrior courses, where somebody says, "Come take my assessment and spend $1,500 at a weekend with us, and we'll teach you everything about the assessment." I go back to that notion of one trick pony assessments are dangerous. You want to be able to, just like you go to the doctor, hey, you go to the doctor and they diagnose you, they're going to check your pulse, maybe do some blood work, run a bunch of different types of blood screens, take your blood pressure, maybe do an x-ray, multiple input channels to get to a diagnosis. We use the same thing here, which is, multiple input channels to kind of create the picture, as it were. So, that was a lot. How are we doing on time? So we did want to finish with some time, so we're sitting at 18 minutes. So we're going to finish with one last poll, and then we'll open it up to questions. So the last poll, which is open-ended, and if it doesn't work on the poll, then please drop it in the chat box. Where can you see applying assessment in your hiring? We'd love to just get a couple of thoughts on that. If people could just, can you see this being an application? Also, while we're at it, we'll throw this into it as well. What might be getting in the way of bringing assessment into your hiring practices? So I'll let Marissa, you're back with us, correct? So
I
you're
am, yeah.
okay. So I'll let you just sort of uh, help with that, please. So has anybody said anything?
We have one response.
One response. We can do better than that, folks.
Oh,
What do you
two.
think? Two? Excellent. Okay, good. Do I hear three? There's a bunch out there.
Yep.
Okay.
Four.
Four. Okay. All right. What do we got, Marissa?
Okay. Can you see the results on your side? I cannot.
I cannot either.
Okay, one second.
Hopefully we can see it. I'm sure there's a way to see these. So,
I can see them here now.
okay.
So I can't share them. Just give me one
Yeah,
second.
that's fine. Just
It's
read them
not
out to me.
sharing, but I'll read them out here.
Yeah, that's it.
Testing accuracy in use in leadership positions
Yeah.
prior to in-person interviews. And then it could be brought in during hiring. The only concern could be around timing as a restraint.
Yeah. Yep. That's an excellent point. There's two big concerns we always get. One is timing and one is cost. So timing is typically a good assessment. And again, I'll just talk from our experience. There's other providers, I'm sure. But in terms of our ability to turn around, we can get a turnaround within probably 48 hours in terms of a verbal debrief with you. A written debrief just takes a little bit longer. That's probably 72 hours. So that's not a huge gap. In terms of cost, the assessments are not cheap. However, I would also put that in the context of, it's a big investment that you're making. So, yeah, I can make the argument all day long that a couple $1,000 on a key investment is probably money well spent, as opposed to them leaving you in 6 months, or worse yet, staying with you in 6 months and dragging down the rest of your organization. But I also recognize that I'm biased in my perspective on that because we do all these assessments. But nonetheless, there it is. What else we got, Marissa?
Mike wanted to know, what is the cost?
Cost. Yeah, it's a great question. It depends on the role. It's really role specific. The more complex and higher the role, so executive level roles can cost anywhere from $2,500 to $3,000 per candidate. So that's expensive, but incredibly powerful. For roles where we don't need to look at as many factors, we have some protocols with companies that are, anywhere from $500 to $1,000 per candidate. There's a organization in Southwestern Ontario where any new and these are what we would call labor type roles. We do assessments on labor type roles, so that might not have been intuitively obvious, but we have ways of measuring things like their orientation to safety, which is critical. Some people are big risk takers and can be problematic in your organization. Others are less so. Looking at again, we always look at interest to see what kind of gets their gets them excited. And are they going to be somebody who's going to come to work on Monday after a long weekend? Or are they going to be getting the Monday flu? We can sort of predict that. So there's lots of different avenues. So anywhere from, $500 per candidate up to as high as $3,000 per candidate, and depending on the role. So, and then of course, depending on how many candidates you have, you can see where some people start to get a rash because it gets super expensive. My counter argument to that is one bad hire can cost you way more than that in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. So there you have it. Okay, great questions. What else we got? Nothing else?
That's all I'm showing on my side for now.
Great. Cool. That's wonderful. If you'd like to learn more about this, shameless self-promotion plug here, but you are on our webinar, so I guess we get to do that. Be happy to chat with you about your own situations, how we might be able to apply some of our approaches to this. There's lots of different ways to come about this, but I really want to leave you with a couple of key thoughts. One is, it's not going to get better. The talent pool is not going to get better for two reasons. One, we have fewer people, and number two, the generations that are coming after my generations, what makes me sound like a cranky old man. They're so reliant on technology and AI that critical thinking skill is sliding. That's going to make it very difficult. So we've got a demographic issue. We also have the ongoing issue of candidates always presenting themselves in a let's just say less than authentic way. And then we have AI that's exacerbating that, which makes it really, really difficult to determine who's really at our doorstep. I remember a few years ago, one of our customers called us up and said, I really need to talk about this assessment because we hired this guy 2 months ago, and he was absolutely brilliant in the interview, and the whole recruitment process was fantastic. And whoever that guy was, he's not the guy that's been showing up at work here for the last 2 months. So again, kind of told them what they wanted to hear, and they got caught and had to terminate the guy, which was, disruptive to the current team, cost them money. I mean, you can figure out all the math on that. It was just it was less than an ideal outcome. So we want to be careful about that, and there are good approaches to this. And also, finally, the other piece is your managers out there are probably hurting. Let's make sure we're getting the people who want to be managers, have the DNA to be managers, have the skills to be managers. Make sure we're putting those in the right spots, and make sure that we're supporting their development going forward. So, and thanks, Mike. Not cranky, maybe old. That's awesome. So. Cool. Well, I hope there was some good, valuable information. As always, if you want to chat about it, door's always open. Answer the phone. Love to chat with you about it a little bit further. And thanks for joining us today. Anything else, Marissa?
No, that's everything on my side.
All right. Coolio. All right. Thanks, folks. Appreciate you coming out today, and we'll see.